Welcome back into this week's edition of the Mast Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I am the territory sales manager for the Mast Sales Group in the states of Kentucky, Indiana, and the southern part of Ohio. Thanks again for tuning in. Joining us today, we have President of Litehouse, Chris Curcio. Chris, welcome into the virtual studio, if you will.
Thanks, Dalton. Glad to be here.
Of course. Now, Litehouse. A little bit of background. I'd like you to kind of fill the listeners in. 15 different locations. Kind of give me a little bit of a backstory of your background, how you got started, what happened to move Litehouse to where it is in 2025.
Okay, well, I don't want to take up too much time or be boring for any of your listeners, but so I started in the business when I was 17. I'm just turned 59, so I've been doing this for a little while, about a little bit over 41 years. But when I started in the business, was just a working part time, going to school, going to college, and a lot of events took place. Litehouse used to do franchise locations, and got involved with. Working at one of the franchise locations, eventually got involved in ownership, and then bought the company after it transitioned a bit in 2008. So Litehouse at one point had, I believe, total of 28 locations, including franchise locations, and now it's 15 company owned. There are still some locations that were previously Litehouse stores operating under different brands at this point, because the franchise model was eliminated in about 2004, and then those stores went off to operate on their own. But like I said, when I bought the company, so I bought the company in 2008. We've expanded a couple of locations, and we're sitting at 15 today. Operate predominantly in northeastern Ohio. One store in Erie, PA, but everything's headquarters in Strongsville, Ohio. Everything is within right about hour and a half, 2 hours from this main location.
And as you know, if you're a frequent listener, and if this is your first time, thanks for jumping in. The goal of this podcast is to highlight some of the very best in the industry in hopes that we can help raise the standard in the pool and outdoor living industry. As I say on every episode, it feels like I'm contractually obligated to say it. A rising tide raises all ships. And if you can take even one piece of information and apply it to help maximize or make your business more efficient, then I feel like we did our jobs. I felt like having Chris on would be great to talk about the leadership and management side of things. 15 different locations seems to me, from where I'm sitting, it seems like a daunting task, because I'm like, man, when I was in retail, managing 2 locations was tough for me, but 15 is incredible. Chris will kind of start out with kind of on that side of the fence. When you have that many locations, how important is delegation in this process, making sure that you're delegating to certain people? What does that look like in your business model?
Well, that obviously, when you have multiple locations, it's huge. You have people playing different roles. What is a little bit easier about it is that you can delegate tasks to people that are a little bit more specialists. So we can have a purchasing manager. We can have accounting staff. We can essentially set up a model where people that are providing support can really more specialize. At the store level, obviously, it's not going to operate too significantly different than any single store would. However, as you're trying to put out programs, you just have to make sure we're communicating well to each of the store managers and staff as we go through. If you're just operating out of a single store, 2 stores, that's a little bit easier to do because you can be present and right in front of them and working with each staffer. So we have to rely on our communications to flow through. But because of the size, we actually can have people dedicated to doing a little bit more specific jobs at the corporate side.
And of course, employees I mean, this goes with any business. They want to go where they feel appreciated. In a company with as many different locations, in your role as president, what's sort of your go-to tactics on, is there a point of emphasis to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm here this often to make sure that my employees make sure that they can come to me if they need anything, if that makes sense.
I am my cell phone, email, fully accessible to every employee at every level. I'm in the office 5 days a week, sometimes more. I'm available whether I'm in the office or not via phone, email to anyone on staff. We if anything arises that somebody needs me, I'm here. But again, because we have people who are sort of specialized in each area, there's a lot of opportunity. People can go directly to a person, whether it be in HR or purchasing or accounting or things like that. There's somebody there to do it. If they're not getting the answers quickly enough or answers that they need, right answers that they feel, everyone in the company is welcome to come to me all the time.
If you're listening to this show, and Chris, I know you've heard this statement as well. Good help is hard to find. It's the tale as old as time. But I would argue that the follow-up question is just as important. Good help is hard to find, but how do you keep them when you find them? Because it feels like in the pool industry, there's a lot of turnover, and in the specialist roles, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but is there something special that Lighthouse does that someone could maybe take some of the ways, like, oh, that's a pretty interesting idea in terms of like employee appreciation? Is there anything different and unique that you all do? And that the answer may be no, but I feel like I have to ask.
I don't know that we're doing anything truly unique. I think we try to find opportunities to show employees appreciation in different ways. Um, I, I think different people respond to different things. Some people like a little bit more time off here or there if they've done a good job. Maybe they get an extra day or afternoon or something like that, and others would like a little bonus. And sometimes just when we get good customer comments on social media, we'll send out a gift card for a local shop for just throw it in an envelope, send it out to the store with their name on it, so they probably don't even realize they've gotten a good customer review for some reason. We just put a little blurb in there. This is what was said about you. Thank you so much for supporting our company, and free lunch on us. Thanks again, and that kind of thing. So I think it's a little bit harder with 15 locations to have that personal touch, at least from my
Sure.
position and maybe some of the people here at the corporate offices. So we've got district managers that oversee the stores, so that they're in constant contact with them at least weekly at every store. So I'm here, I'm available. I try to get out to stores with some degree of regularity, but unfortunately, I don't have necessarily always that personal touch with the employee. That's one thing that is probably the worst part about having multiple locations. You can't see everybody all the time.
So when it comes to the hiring process, we talk about delegation. It's when you're hiring large scale and you have specialists, but still, in the retail side of things, you're still. Are you hiring? You still have? Is it seasonal workers, or do you find something to have them around all year long?
We still, yeah, we have about 150 full time year round, and then seasonally we'll add up to about another 50 or so staff. So depends on the size of the store. So we do have stores that range from about 7,000 square feet to about 19,000 square feet. So depending upon the size of the store. Customer base it's serving, we'll hire on more staff seasonally. But yeah, hiring is always a challenge, especially these days since COVID. It's become more challenging, but we seem to be able to get there as we move into the season, bring that seasonal staff in.
Now, chances are, if whoever's listening to this isn't close to the 15 store range, if you're in the retail spot, but if you can kind of apply the similarities, let's say there's a company out there that says, you know what, we've sort of outgrown our footprint. There's a market out there that we feel like, we could put a second store in. But maybe there's a little hesitancy. I see it in the Kentucky market, some people wanting to branch out, but obviously, naturally, there's that hesitancy. If you could sort of pinpoint a couple things like, okay, if you're going to do this, you'll say, Dalton, if you're going to make that second store, this is what you need to focus on. Is there a thing or two that you could point to and say, if you're going to do this, this is something you have to have 100% nailed down, no questions asked. Outside of the staffing part of the thing, of course, you
Yeah.
have to have the people who work. But outside of that, is there anything you're like, okay, boom, boom, boom?
Well, I think as soon as you go to a second location, you provide you start to have a logistics issue, right? Everything's not maybe coming to one location. Now you've got product going to potentially two locations. Do you need additional warehousing now to now service, or you're looking at a location that has its own warehousing, things like that. So are you writing two purchase orders and splitting it up? How are you going to manage that? Are you really applying double the work, or is there an opportunity to be able to, hey, I'm going to send in one purchase order, double that up, and send one to this location, send to that location. So I think it just becomes more of a logistics and management issue. Obviously, it's staffing. If you have a great person to run it for you, that can run it like they're an owner, that solves a lot of those issues, because that helps to take care of some of those logistics problems that you potentially run into. So it depends how far away. If it's a few miles, meaning maybe it's a half hour difference drive from one location to the other. If it's hours difference, obviously that creates potentially more logistical issues. So.
Chris Curcio joining us today on the Mass Podcast, president of Litehouse Pools and Spas up in the Ohio area and a location in Pennsylvania. Didn't know that, so you learn something new every day. Chris, this is a question that I feel like the business or the industry, I should clarify, sort of struggles with, and everyone you talk to is different. And having 15 locations, I'm curious on this. Um, when you're hiring in that process, the whole debate over having or not having previous pool experience, because not everyone has it.
Mhm.
I'll start out with, how important is it to you? Like, are you looking for more of the experience side of things, or you say, you know what, that would be great to have, but I'm also looking for these personal characteristic traits from a person, but that's more important. What do you sort of prioritize the most when it comes to that hiring process?
I think it's more about personal traits and his pool industry knowledge. Now, if somebody came along and they've been working in the retail industry, selling pools and hot tubs for the last 15 years, well, obviously they're probably going to be somebody we look at right away. But typical personality traits, are you successful at it? Are you uh, we kind of draw the line between two types, general types of individuals. There are people who are more operationally minded and others that are more sales minded or customer centric. So you need both. You need people who can sell product, talk with customers, take care of issues, help with product knowledge, things like that. But you also need people who operationally can make sure the paperwork's being taken care of, orders are handled, brought in, stock shelves, things like that. So finding individuals who possess both of those things at a high level is very difficult. So we have a tendency to try to focus more so on the personality of the individual. If we're fortunate enough to find somebody with experience, sometimes that's useful. We've also had people apply for positions that have had experience that we've stayed away from because maybe their experience was something significantly different, or their personality just doesn't seem to fit the mold, whether they've got industry experience or not. So it's really more of a focus on the individual and the personality. We can train the other stuff.
Of course, of course. You can't really train the character of an individual.
No.
Um, Kind of switching over, I stopped into a retail store, not even in the industry. It was a completely different industry, probably. maybe 3 weeks ago, and had a conversation with the owner who was just out and about, and we were talking about the challenges of retail in today's realm in 2025, and they kept mentioning, retail is dying, and I said, well, maybe retail faces some unique challenges that it didn't face back in 2015, but I feel like it all kind of is in the name of being able to differentiate and do things differently that big box stores kind of don't really have at their disposal. When you have 15 locations, maybe there's a little bit more of a competitive advantage over just one, mom and pop location, if you will. But for those companies that are in the same, side of things that we are, what's some things you kind of look at in terms of differentiation? I know you all do a couple different things. Like if I was to ask, hey, Chris, what separates Lighthouse from me going to Amazon or Walmart and getting what I need?
Well, I think the truth is what's going to change the shopping experience, especially retailer versus a big box, is training, product knowledge, customer service, those types of things.
Yeah,
We are large enough to be able to buy at pricing levels that give us a bit of an advantage over a single store operator,
sure.
obviously, even if they're in a buying group or buying through distribution. So we have some advantages there because of the size of the company. But when you're specifically talking, this industry, specialty retail, or even a number of industries, specialty retail versus big box. There are advantages to buying from specialty retail because of that customer experience, the knowledge you're going to be able to get. I don't believe retail is dying. I think
I don't
retail is
either.
evolving. I think especially retailers have to evaluate where they fit in the market and do they best serve their customers. Maybe they need to adapt product offerings or things of that nature. However, I don't believe specialty retail is dying. I think there are just different challenges. So big box retail is continuing to grow. I mean, Walmart's not didn't stop building buildings. Home Depot, Lowe's, they're still opening new stores all over the country. I mean, you even have Amazon that's open brick and mortar. So if Amazon is doing what they're doing and they're continuing to open brick and mortar stores, obviously there must be a value to having a location where somebody can go to, drive there, get my item right now, and go home with it, and maybe, and
Mhm.
again in our industry, maybe get additional product knowledge that I didn't just read off the screen. So
There are two things that, maybe one, maybe the other, or maybe both on every episode that the whole reason why this podcast even started. Number one, innovation. This industry is evolving constantly. Number two, differentiation. What are you doing differently? And I agree with you fully. I don't think that retail is dying whatsoever. It's challenging. Don't get me wrong. I feel like the challenges you face in 2025 are probably the most daunting that there have been. I mean, I granted my sample size is small, only working retail when I was in high school and summers up through college before I joined distribution and now on the manufacturing side of things. So I've seen it in a couple different ways. It's just a matter of you have to turn the conversation from, well, can't really compete to, well, why not? There's
yeah,
some things that you have at your fingertips that you can sort of spin positively, and I think that you just have to hammer that home. Like, of course, the big box hammers home the advantages on one side. You have to sort of flip the script and show why you can differentiate there. And I wonder, especially with different markets, because different markets, everything, I mean, nothing is ever the same, and I wonder, even in the pocket of Ohio and Pennsylvania that you're in, Chris, not every market's the same. Do you see certain levels of success with certain lines that you try? Is there sort of a hesitancy to introduce some of those lines to certain areas? Or do you just kind of go in and say, we're going to offer X, Y, Z regardless?
yeah, I think we do. We try to take the approach that everything we carry works pretty much everywhere, provided that the store footprint
Sure.
allows for it to be demonstrated, displayed properly.
Mhm.
So yeah, again, I think the big thing that's going to, especially in our industry, we have service that's not offered through a big box. We have products that are not offered through a big box. You can buy a hot tub online. You can go to Costco.com and buy a hot tub online, of course. Is it a high quality hot tub? Are you going to learn much about it? Are you going to be able to touch it, feel it, sit in the seats, things like that? No, you're not going to be able to do that. From the pool side, managing service and installation, stuff like that. It's just not going to go anytime soon off to the internet or off to the big box. And honestly, that's not the type of business they want to be in anyway.
Right.
They want to take a box and deliver it to you simply, easily. Once you start getting into things that are outside of the cookie cutter design, they really don't want to be there, and that's really where we're at. That's why this industry continues to evolve and have the ability to grow. I think we're underserved in this industry significantly by many retail locations. So
Sure.
lots of growth.
Of course, of course. One thing we like to do on every episode, Chris, is introduce a mailbag question. A question that pertains to the obvious respective topics that we're sort of in, a sector that we're in. Chris, the mailbag question today, and I kind of get different vibes from this question, depending on who you ask. How much does installing and maintaining a culture matter in business? Just, I guess you would say in your business. Like, is it overblown? We talk about this term culture. Like, is it one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's kind of a facade, or is it something like, yeah, I mean, this is something that we focus on and we install it constantly. Well, what's your thought process on that?
I think it's something that we work on constantly in retail. One of the biggest challenges is turnover. We have some long term employees. Obviously, some people have been here for almost as long as I've been around here.
Sure.
But then we've got other people that are kind of transitioning through, and they'll take a retail job for a year or less, and then move on to something else. And
Hmm.
that happens no matter what you do. It's our intent to try to infuse that culture as quickly as we possibly can,
Right.
and that is why when we're interviewing, we actually try to base our hiring processes off of similar characteristics. We actually use
Right.
products to do a little personality testing, if you will, to understand how will you fit in with what we're doing here and how good of a fit are we for you. You may find you get on the other side of this and not maybe you're not a good fit for us, but we may not be a good fit for you, and we've got to try to determine that early on so that neither one of us are wasting our time going through training and things, and then you find out this just isn't the right experience for me. So culture is huge. I think it's a little bit more difficult to maintain as you have 15 stores, because geographically that culture has some minor adaptations to it.
Right.
But I think providing a good work environment where people are happy, both the people who work there and the company can both benefit from it. That's a culture we all try to achieve. Hey, we sell fun stuff. We want people to have a good time while they're doing it, right?
We're in a fun industry, and I know it gets stressful, but we kind of got to go back to thinking that we sell luxury.
Yeah.
That's what we're in. Chris, one more question for you. Like I said, a lot of this is people being able to draw inspiration, draw advice. If I were to ask you, of all the stuff that we talked about, what would you feel like is the most important talking point? Is it more so, when you're talking about the leaders, you can draw from the leadership aspiration of this, you can talk from efficiency, large scale. What's one thing that you feel like you've said that you want to hammer home on to those listening and say, you know what, this is something I would focus on if you're in this headspace?
Well, whatever you can do to get people to be able to specialize in certain areas, I think provides a more stable environment. So we oftentimes, especially when we're just running a store or two stores, it's difficult to do. You got to wear a lot of hats. The employees have
Right.
to wear a lot of hats different times of the day. But wherever you can find opportunity for people to specialize in specific areas, uh, most times, not always. Some people love wearing 20 hats a day, and that's great. And if they're
Not
good with
me.
that, that's great, and that's good for the culture. A lot of people like to do what they're doing
Sure.
and focus on specific areas. Um, try to see what you can do to provide that. Because if you have somebody that can focus on a particular area of the business time after time, day after day, and they feel comfortable doing it and they're happy doing it, I think it provides a more stable work environment for both them, and you also get more stable output. So.
A lot of great stuff. Chris Curcio, president of Litehouse Pools and Spas, joining us on today's edition. That's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Mast Podcast. Everyone have a great day. Don't forget, a rising tide raises all ships. So we'll see you back here next week.